back to NewsX World. I'm Megha Sharma and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. Japan's far-right populist Sanseito party was one of the biggest winners in the recent upper house elections, attracting many voters with its Japanese-first platform that included calling for tougher sanctions on foreigners and the curtailment of gender equality and diversity policies. This has weakened the position of the Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, whose party has now lost majority in both houses of the parliament. Will Prime Minister Ishiba be able to stay in power despite all odds? Will the Sanseito party play a larger role in Japanese politics hereon? And are the people of Japan now looking for a change? Joining us now is Jeffrey Hall, who is the lecturer at the Kanda University of International Studies in Tokyo. Jeffrey's research and writing is focused on political and social issues in Japan. He is the author of Japan's Nationalist Right in the Internet Age, which is a book about Japanese conservative activism relating to historical memory and territorial disputes. Thank you, Jeffrey, for joining us. My first question to you: how do you react to the Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba losing majority in the upper house of the parliament?
Well, I think that it is something that is startling in that it's a historically horrible defeat for the LDP, but this is one of these defeats that has a blessing for Ishiba and the LDP in that this time the opposition is highly divided. So although many people voted against the LDP and it lost its majority, there's no single opposition party that can form a government. So the LDP is likely to continue as a stable government, even though it's a minority government, with the help occasionally of smaller center-right parties when they need to pass bills. Each time they can negotiate and get this legislation passed. So it is a setback, but they can work through this.
What is the future of Shigeru Ishiba and his Liberal Democratic Party hereon?
Right. So at this point, Ishiba is determined to stay on until, at the very least, tariff negotiations with the United States can be achieved. The deadline that Donald Trump has set is August 1st, and Ishiba cited that crisis as a reason why he needs to stay on as prime minister. But there is pressure within his party, and that pressure is growing. It's not quite clear yet if it's enough to force him out. But if a large portion of the LDP decides they want to change leaders, it could be the end of Ishiba and the beginning of another LDP leader.
Why has the right-wing populist party, Sanseito, emerged as a massive winner in these parliamentary elections?
Yes, one of the big winners of this election is Sanseito. They had only 2 seats before this election. Now they have 15. They were able to take advantage of the ruling coalition's lack of communication with the public about the increase of immigration in Japan. For the last 10 years, there has been an increase of about 1 million immigrants in Japan, and the LDP didn't really tell the public openly that they want to have lots and lots of foreign workers to do sometimes menial jobs in factories or farms. So the Sanseito party was able to take advantage of this opening and just attack the government on its immigration policy, blame the government for letting in too many immigrants, and they spread a lot of misinformation about harm that is being caused by these immigrants.
Why has Sanseito's Japanese First campaign resonated with the people of Japan?
I think it's a very simple message that resonates with a certain segment of the voters, particularly, as you said, the youth. That it would be in Japan people under the age of 60. The young people in this country are not very numerous. This is a gray democracy, as people will say. But these working age people, they feel the pressure of having to pay for the elderly in the future. And their country has this birth rate problem, and the government has been trying to partially solve it through immigration. And these young people don't like the changes that are taking place in Japan, or at least they perceive these changes by looking at internet media such as YouTube. And they also don't like the huge increase in tourism that has filled Japan's city streets with large numbers of foreigners speaking foreign languages who are not immigrants, but still contribute to feelings of distress and xenophobia among Japanese who don't like the idea of their culture changing.
Will the Japanese economy continue to teeter in wake of the anti-immigration sentiment amongst the public, especially the youth of the country?
Well, that is the big question. If every single 18-year-old woman in Japan had 3 children for the next 3 years, maybe that would solve the demographic problem, but that would take 18 years for Japan to get those children old enough to even work. So for the meantime, in the future, Japan is going to have labor shortages, and the amount of immigrants who have been coming in have not been enough to offset the decline in population, even though it has been a rather large increase in immigrants. So the government has to politically balance the aversion that some voters have to immigration with the demands of Japanese businesses, which don't have enough workers, and they would want to hire Japanese people if those people existed. But every year, there's less 18-year-olds, and this is not going to change for any time in the future. So this country has to figure out some kind of solution, but no politician seems to be in favor of mass immigration.
Do you see a global trend where right-wing political parties are gaining support from the public? And why do you think such a phenomenon now exists?
Well, I can't speak for the other countries because I'm not an expert on them. But in the case of Japan, these YouTubers and influencers who support Sanseito, they have been very active in translating the far-right news from other countries. So news from Europe, news from America, and creating this sense of crisis among people who consume internet media in Japan that Japan is being invaded by immigrants and that Japan could face this doomed future that they depict in Europe and America by exaggerating the most extreme examples of violence and crime by migrants. And so this global far right has influenced this Japanese far right Sanseito party. And the leader of the party, a YouTuber himself, he is inspired by Trump and he wants to replicate this kind of movement in Japan. But I should note that this is only about 10% of the population. So we're not talking about a huge number of Japanese people going to this movement, but by just having this presence in the legislature and in the media from now on, this kind of talk will be sort of normalized in Japan.
Will it be difficult for Prime Minister Ishiba to now stabilize his position after facing this huge loss in the upper house of the parliament?
Well, Ishiba's position as prime minister depends on whether enough of the LDP has confidence in him. And at the time I'm saying this, it's still not yet at a critical mass where they can kick him out or recall him as prime minister. But there is potential for that to happen. One potential situation is that he doesn't pull off a trade deal with Trump by the deadline, and that would cause them to blame him for the huge economic damage that tariffs will do to Japan. But in terms of passing legislation, they don't need to bring people, other lawmakers, back into the party. They don't even need an election for the next few years. Instead, what they can do is reach out to two center-right parties, the Ishin Party and the Democratic Party for the People, who have a lot of connective tissue ideologically to the LDP. So they will agree with a lot of the LDP's legislation. And until now, in the last year, they've agreed with over 90% of the bills that the LDP has put through, with some minor changes and compromises. But this is not a situation where the LDP has to do too much to get bills passed, but retrieving the confidence of voters will probably require a totally new refresh of the leadership of the party sometime before the next election.
Has the rift between the Liberal Democratic Party led to Ishiba losing the majority in the lower and the upper houses?
Absolutely. This rift within the LDP and within conservative voters in Japan is caused by the absence of former Prime Minister Abe, who was a unifying figure of conservatives in Japan. And so now that he is dead after he died through that terrible assassination, it caused many scandals to come to light about the LDP. And it also caused a rift between the conservative, very right-wing part of the LDP and the more moderate part of the LDP. And Mr. Ishiba is from that moderate part of the LDP. He was an ideological foe of Abe, a rival for years. And so the people who loved Prime Minister Abe don't really like Mr. Ishiba. And I think a lot of voters who would have loved Abe or an Abe-like figure went to vote for conservative alternatives to the LDP because they are turned off by Ishiba. They don't think he's tough enough against China. They don't think he agrees with them on culture issues and the view of history that Mr. Abe had. So it's been very difficult for him to keep those conservative voters supporting the LDP.
If Prime Minister Ishiba were to step down, who do you think could replace him?
Yes, there are a few names. The main rival that Ishiba faces is Miss Takaichi. She portrays herself as the successor to Abe's conservative legacy, and she has the support of many of Abe's old friends. There's also on the moderate side the young Koizumi, who is the son of the very popular prime minister from the 2000s, his father, Koizumi Junichiro. So there's another figure as well, Mr. Hayashi, who is currently a major figure in the cabinet, who is also moderate. And so these three figures are probably the top three who will vie for the leadership of the party if there is a new election held soon for LDP leadership.
What is the future of Sanseito party and its leader Kamiya in the Japanese politics here on?
Well, that's the big question. I mean, they are a small party. Their views are very, very extreme. So the chance of the LDP working with them is probably pretty low. But there's always kind of wild card situations like right-wing members of the LDP breaking off and starting a new party and maybe merging with Sanseito, or Sanseito moderating its conspiracy theory kind of views and becoming more like the LDP. But right now, the party is firmly under the leadership of Mr. Kamiya, the YouTuber, who is someone who has very extreme views. And so as long as he can keep unity in his party, they will be a voice that is heard a lot in Japanese media and on the internet, but their chances of actually becoming part of the government or influencing the government in a major way are probably not that big. They're not a large party, and the center-right parties outnumber them. So those center-right parties will probably get more cooperation from the government.
Thank you, Jeffrey Hall, for speaking to us on Focal Length. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of The Focal Length. For more international news and updates, stay tuned on NewsX World.